Well, welcome to our Leading at a Local Level podcast. It's great to be back with you. How are you doing, John? You well?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, Tim. Loving the lockdown life, but yeah, I'm all right. I think both of us are getting to the point and need some haircuts soon, but yeah, all
Oh,
good.
I was quite pleased with the government's announcement giving us some dates, but the date that depressed me most was the fact that hairdressers are not open until the 12th of April, because that will have literally been 6 months, maybe, since I'll have had a haircut, and it's not great, to be honest.
I've had my Turkish neighbour who owned a set of barber shops. He keeps saying to me when I see him down the road, he said, "You know, I'll come, I'll sort your hair out. You know, I'll sort your beard out." He's obviously very concerned about me, and it's a real temptation. But I've said no. I've been good so far.
Good, excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to look today at the subject of how to focus on what matters most. And I don't know about you, John, but I would say that one of the biggest challenges I have in leadership is to prioritize things and to organize my time well. And we're actually responding to a question from a lady called Sam. And she has sent us in a little video asking us to deal with this question. So over to you, Sam.
Hi there. So I had a question for Tim. It was based on the first podcast you did about the power in saying no. But you had touched on a different subject. It was about your tasks. And you'd mentioned something about a way that you prioritize the task. So there was like urgent and important, not urgent, not important, and a mix of the two. I just wondered if you could go into a little more depth with that. Thanks very much. Take care.
Well, what do you think of that, John?
Yeah, it's a great question actually, and I think getting practical is so important, isn't it, for these things? Because life is life. It's good to talk about things, about theory, and what we think about things. But yeah, great question, and I'm looking forward just to getting down some practicalities of how we do it, because we all live such busy lives. It's such a common statement, isn't it? How are you? Oh, I'm just so busy, and it is. Life's busy. It's even in lockdown. Some people are saying to me, I feel more busy than ever. So I think it's a great question. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I think the danger is sometimes I mean, one of the things my dad said to me, right, when I was young, he said, the thing is, Tim, is everyone has the same amount of time. Doesn't matter whether you are in charge of Amazon, a big CEO
Yeah,
of a big corporation, or you're just someone just looking after your kids every day, taking them to school. Everyone still has the same amount of time. The question is, what do you do with it? And I think it is just, time is a resource that's given to us by God, and so it's so important that we use it
yeah,
wisely. But one of my worries about a conversation like this, and it might be a worry for others in this, is that if we're not careful, particularly if we're doing stuff from a church, that we can almost get sucked into productivity, like a very kind of
yeah,
productivity mindset. Like I'm all about, like, my value is in what I can do and how many
yeah.
tasks I can tick off. I mean, how would you respond to someone that might be thinking that straight away when we start
Yeah.
talking about task management?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think that is one of the big risks that we face, and I think that comes from the past decades of sort of human beings becoming like these economic machines, and we're kind of almost likened to machines sometimes in the way that we speak about people as producers, as people who are contributing something to society, and of course we've got to go back to the truth that we're human beings, not human doings. We're made in the image of God, and we're called to
Yeah,
be before God. So that's so important, and yet the Bible is just full of advice about how we wisely use our time. So I was just in Proverbs 6 this morning, part of my Bible in the Year stuff, and talking about consider the ant. So I spent a few moments this morning considering the ant, and there were many under my patio. So I was slightly frustrated at first, but then I was like, no, consider the ant. And they store up, they make plans, they consider, even an ant, how they produce and how they sort of store for the future. And all the way through Scripture, the way Jesus speaks about the parable of the talents, we are encouraged to carefully consider what we've got and how we invest it and how we see that multiply. And I do believe that time is one of those things. But I completely agree. Let's not go too far with the whole, we're producers, but let's not lose it either. That actually is a biblical principle, that let's be wise with our time and use it well.
absolutely. I love Proverbs 6 just for the use of the word sluggard.
The sluggard. Oh, yes.
Which is I think it's probably in the more traditional versions. I wonder if that's still in some of the modern versions.
Not in the message, no.
Not in the message version. No, I doubt it is. So I think, I mean, great question, really, or great answer to that question about sort of productivity. And I suppose if I'm responding to you, Sam, the first thing I would say is just thinking a bit about really making sure that our priorities are right before God. And I think that's really the place to start is asking the rule, what should I be doing? And I think we might maybe do another podcast trying to explore that a little bit more deeply. But the way that I practically do that, I don't know about you, John, but I would sit down generally I do it about every 3 months. John and I are a little bit different. I'm a little bit more like, hey, go with the flow. And John's a bit more like, like make it happen on a deadline. I kind of periodically, about every 3 months, sit down and sort of say, what is it I should do over the next few months? Where's my big picture focus? I mean, I know you do that, John. So tell us a little bit about why you do that and why you think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, it's mainly, Tim, because life starts to happen to me. And we talked a bit about that, I think, in that Freedom of No podcast. But, when life starts to happen and I'm overwhelmed just with life, just with the normality of life, kids, work, church, just so many things happening, I suddenly think, wow, I'm doing all of these things, but are they the right things? Am I doing something that maybe someone else should be doing? Or am I doing something that actually I just shouldn't be doing, full stop? I'm not sleeping very well at the moment. I'm not getting enough sleep because I'm trying to do too many things. Or you might have the opposite problem that, actually thinking, well, I'm not doing some things. And so I think actually just pausing, and I just need that time. I may be a simpleton, but I need that time just to pause and just to step back and look at the big picture. And think, well, what is going on here? What's been happening? Where are things going? What perhaps should I prioritize? And just pause to talk to God about it, but also to stop for long enough to listen to Him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that the sort of thing? Is that how you find it, Tim, when you think about those 3 monthly kind of reviews?
Yeah, absolutely. What often happens is you go down a road and it was the right thing to do, a year ago, 6 months ago, maybe 5 years ago, and you just start to feel, hang on a second, this thing I'm doing is just becoming really challenging or really tiresome, or just and just because it's tiresome doesn't mean it's a reason to stop. But I do think sometimes it's a good opportunity just to sit down and say, really, Lord, what should I be doing? How should I be approaching this? Where should my energies go? Maybe it's a season. I mean, for me as a church leader, it might be like, I really feel this next season is a teaching season for the church. So I'm going to invest a lot more of my energy in preparing maybe the studies that we're doing. Our church did Revelation just before Christmas or through the autumn. And that took a lot of energy. And by the end, I was genuinely exhausted. But that was a season. And then I realized that, no, now I need to focus on, the church, from a leadership point of view. And so I think just stopping periodically. I mean, my background is teaching, so I tend to do things in terms, So generally, at like Easter in the summer and at Christmas would be the points when I'd sort of stop and be like, right, okay, let's just stop and refocus, because otherwise you jump straight into your tasks, don't you?
Yeah.
And you're, in a sense, as we're going to talk about in a minute, you can prioritize your tasks wrongly based on the fact you haven't really got your big picture. Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I do something the thing I try to do is every year, so the minimum. So I don't always do it I must admit, I think I missed my last quarterly one, and I can feel it. I can certainly feel.
You missed your last quarterly one, really?
Yeah, well, yeah. But I think and I can feel it. I can feel it when I haven't actually stopped and thought. I can feel a bit of panic. But at least that yearly one, and every year I spend some time doing that, and that's focused on sort of my work, but also on my family. And on my marriage. For me, I'm married, so for me, my marriage, and I have some sort of structured questions that I work through, and we can share some of these. They're helpful, but I find it helpful to do that and to sit down with my wife as well. And questions like, what is it that I know God has called me to? And often that's a reaffirmation of what's happened. It's not like every year it's like, what's going to happen next? It's generally fairly consistent with a few changes. But where am I seeing fruit? What's going well? What would stop me from being fruitful? Where can I see like this? It might be a time pressures or temptation, whatever it might be, and say, Lord, I maybe need to bring that before you. And then the very practical questions, what should I continue doing? What do I need to stop doing? And what maybe do I need to start doing? And I find that really helpful, just sort of every year, just to to have that time, usually a day, just to do that. I do it in January.
I think one of the questions that I asked, that you asked, the same question. Really, what can only I do?
Yeah.
Right, that's one of the questions that I ask myself a lot. What is it only I can do? And I think maybe some of us think that's a bit of an arrogant question, but
Mm,
as a leader, there are some things that only I can do.
yeah.
Right, only I can really develop the leader. Kind of the kind of the more mature leaders in our church. Only I can do that. I can't give
Yeah.
that to someone else in the church. Like preaching. Some of the preaching I might be able to give to other people. I might be able to give that way, but as a leader, there are some things that you need to stamp all over in
Yeah.
a really good way, and you need to put your stamp on, and that can change season to season. But in this
Yeah.
season, for me, that's the question I was: what is it? What is my most important thing to be doing, or not just one, but maybe my few most important things to be doing, and then my priorities will then focus around that, and I will try and move a few things that maybe other people could do onto others if they've got
Yeah.
capacity.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah, I
agree.
think that's really helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I'll
Yeah,
just add as well that we're listening to God, but also, as we talked about in our feedback episodes, actually we can do this in community. And so sometimes that question, what is it that only I can do? Sometimes we find that hard. Sometimes I think, well, what is it that I'm good at? And a lot of us struggle with that. Really. So that's where doing this in community, asking other people the
yeah,
question, perhaps when you're reviewing or when you're thinking about setting your priorities, ask a couple of people that you trust and say, is that a realistic view of myself? I really think I should be focusing on this year. How do you see that? And involve other people in setting your priorities. And I do that. I do that frequently.
yeah. I mean, that's a really powerful point actually, because as I do that, I'll sit down with my elders,
Yeah.
often on a one-to-one basis, and that's why it didn't immediately spring to my mind. But I absolutely do that. I will
Yeah.
absolutely sit down and say, guys, I think this is what I should be doing and they'll say, yeah, we think that's right, or most of the time they say yes. Sometimes they say, well, I don't know actually, I'm not sure that is the right thing,
Yeah.
and then go back and reevaluate. So yeah, that's really powerful. Do it in community. That's great. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to move on just to talk about the way I manage my tasks.
Yeah.
Sam asked that question really specifically
Yeah.
about
Let's do it. Yeah.
how I manage my tasks. Now, I'd like to say this is the way I do it. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Other people may have different ways, and maybe you can write in your ways of doing it. But this is how I do it. Now, I structure my time into 4 quadrants, and I'm going to put an image up on the screen so you can see it. And I categorize my tasks into 4 areas, okay? And that is urgent and important, urgent but not important, important but not urgent, and not important and not urgent. All right. And
Mm.
so I have 4 areas. And so I thought I'd just talk you through that, how that works. So obviously the most obvious one, the one that's going to scream for your attention, is urgent and important, right? And for me, that's things like sermon preparation. Like, I've got to prepare my message by this Sunday. I can't say, oh, well, I'll put that off to next week, right?
Yeah.
It has to be done then. If it's a key pastoral issue, someone's phoned up and said, look, I've really got a problem. I need to deal with this. I
Yeah.
can't kind of say I'll deal with that in 2 weeks' time. I've really got to go in the next day or two, right? Or if there's overdue work. So when John's hassling me for notes for this podcast, which I haven't got around to doing, suddenly that becomes urgent. Yeah.
Oh, a little insight into how this all works.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And so for me, that those are the things that I must do
Yeah.
really often, right?
Yeah.
Um, uh, would you add anything? Would you add
Yeah.
anything?
No, I agree. I was just thinking, they're great examples. I think sometimes in everyday life, it's things like, I'm just looking at a bill that I need to pay. There's various things just in leading our homes, and just that can be really urgent, important. I'm going to get a fine if I don't pay this bill,
Yeah.
which should have been paid last week. So yeah, and I'm just aware it's there, it's sitting, and I've got to do it.
Was it a parking fine, John?
It's not actually. No, I won't go into it though. It's a household utility.
Yeah,
Promise.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. And so the second category is important but not urgent, right? And these are things that really need to be done in maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks, right? Or maybe just over the next kind of month or so. And they tend to be focused around the longer term stuff. The longer term stuff. I'm struggling to look.
Oh, do you need drink of water? Oh, he's got the water. Let's see if it does the trick.
Got a frog in my throat.
Very good.
Oh. Yeah, so
we were just talking about frogs yesterday, actually, and how we produced some frogs a couple of years ago, and our cats basically sat there as they matured, and they just were catching them and eating them as they came out. So we were just debating that yesterday. But there you go. Consider the frog.
Consider the frog, indeed. Anyway, back to important, but not urgent. So these tend to be, so important, not urgent is the long-term stuff. So it's the stuff that, like, if you don't do it sooner or later, it's going to have a massive impact over time, but you can kind of put it off. So for me, that's meeting with key leaders in my church or key people. It's stuff like spending time thinking about the planning for the future. You know, what are we going to be doing in 6 months' time? Where is the church heading? You know, what do we need to do? Say if we're talking about MLG, like how are we thinking about the conference say next year? Or if I'm studying a particular topic, I'm like, I need to study a topic, and so I put that into the not urgent but still very important category. What about you, John? What would you shove in that category?
Yeah, I think similar. It's long-term planning. It's something like setting aside a day, if I can, without kids, and planning that in, so I can have a day of review for a year. It's really important. But, if it doesn't happen, the world doesn't stop spinning. I keep on going. No one will really notice. I mean, I also find that it sounds funny, but with my prayer life, it's important, but it doesn't appear to be urgent, because some days there's not anything that I'm particularly relying on God. It feels like I'm not particularly relying on God for urgently. There's times when I'm going to pray urgently. So I think actually just my walk with God, many days, it's important, and I need to set aside time for it, but it doesn't always feel as urgent when there's other pressing issues, going on.
Absolutely. So then you've got the next category is then the urgent but not that important, right? And this, I think, often is where a lot of people get tricked.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you find things that, and particularly the bigger an organisation you work for, the more stuff is urgent. People are hassling you for stuff. You must find someone saying, and what they want is they want you to give them something immediately because it's slowing them down, or they want to move on, but it might not be a priority for you, but it's sort of coming onto your desk, as it were. And so for me, it's things like responding to emails, right? I know that it's often urgent. I need to reply to that email, but to be honest, it's really not that important. It's things like writing social media posts for me, uploading blog posts, but often I think, it's say like, it's stuff that's coming onto your plate from other people often, isn't it? And it's having the courage sometimes, and this is go back to the freedom of no, it's having the courage to say, I'm really sorry. Yeah, that might feel urgent, but it's not actually that important. I'm going to have to just pause on that a second and not allow that to swamp me, I don't know what you think about that, John.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, I feel the same, and I think a lot of people listening to it will resonate with some of those things that just seem to be so urgent, and sometimes just stopping and thinking, is this important? Because to me, they often do feel important. They are, it's made important by its urgency, and that's the, I guess, the discipline and the habit of just having that moment just to step back, as we spoke about in that previous episode, and just thinking about it and just saying, I'm not going to give you the answer just for the moment. I just need to consider this, and suddenly you realize, actually, this isn't as important as I thought it was. But if we make everything important, which I can say everything's important, then nothing becomes important. Yeah, exactly. So I think choosing what is important is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's very good. And I mean, that's good. What did you say? Like if
everything's important, then nothing's important.
Exactly. And I think that is the key. It's working out, isn't it? And so then the last category is not urgent, not important. And really, you can sort of say, well, if it's not urgent, not important, why is it even there? But there are tasks that are not urgent and not that important. For me, it's things like, often when I read a book, I try and make notes on that book. I've read the book. I just kind of maybe want to reflect on a few key points. It's not that important. It's not that urgent, but for me, it's useful. Listening to podcasts are often not that important, not that urgent. Clearing your inbox, tidying up your office, making general pastoral calls for me. Just giving people a call that I haven't spoken to that are fine, but just nice to touch base. And it is important to realise that there are quite a few things I think that fall into that category, and this is why what I'm going to talk about next in a second is really important in terms of making sure that we move things through almost through these steps, and so eventually something that's not important and not urgent does eventually become important and urgent.
Well, why don't you do it, Tim? I'm intrigued actually, 'cause I'm not sure what you're going to say here, but I'm intrigued as to how you do that.
So what I do is I sit down every day. I try to most days, particularly when I'm sat at my desk, and I try really hard to look at that task list at the end of every day. And I will look through the things that are urgent and important, and I will obviously I've ticked them off if I've done them. But obviously, if they're then what I do is I almost review like what's then on the urgent, not important list, and I'll kind of do I need to bump that up tomorrow for urgent and important, right?
Okay.
And so I'm constantly looking at do I need to bump things up from lower down the kind of the list from the from the not important section up to the important section, and so I do that on a weekly basis. A daily basis every day. I try and do that so that each day I know these are my priority tasks for the day. And then what I do is actually then do that at the end of every week. I mean, I do it on a Friday afternoon. I think you, John, do it on a Sunday, don't you? But I will often sit down and I will look at my calendar for the week ahead, and I will look at my list of all the things that are on my list, and I will reprioritize things. So I'll take something that was not important, not urgent, and I will move it into another category. I'll move it up the chain, as it were, so that sooner or later it's not just forever sitting in the not urgent, not important category. And if it really isn't that important and it really isn't that urgent, after a while I'll just bin it, because I'm like, well, if I've left it there for a month or two, then really I can probably do without it altogether.
No, that's really interesting. And thanks for sharing that, Tim. I mean, I think I'm just reflecting that good friend of ours, Stu, who runs a blog post called the Driverless Crocodile, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes. But it's a great name. But he's got some great advice there about task management and so on. And I think that's really helpful. I mean, I also think, as I'm looking at things, why am I avoiding certain things? The things that I avoid are the things that I find difficult. They're the things that often require more mental effort. They might mean a bit of, time. And I like things like, I'll answer some emails. And it's so easy to get distracted. And maybe we should sort of maybe finish on that really, Tim. I mean, there's some of the things that put us off, actually doing those big things. But, I often look and think, well, why am I avoiding that? What is it about this task that's going to take a lot of energy? And so I often think about my energy management as well. As I'm putting things into these categories, I do it slightly differently to you, but a similar theme. Well, I'm thinking, what's going to really take my energy, and when is it best for me to do that? And so I know when I'm at my best. And so I got up early this morning to do something that I knew I just needed to crack through, and that at 5 o'clock today, I will not feel like doing that task. And so it's choosing when I'm at my best. And we all know each other. We know ourselves. Ask other people. If you live with people, ask them when you're at your best. They'll tell you, and then use that. Try and kind of put your task into those days and times of day where you think that's going to really help me. I mean, I don't know if you find that to be a reality for you too.
Those are my friends about a year or so ago will remember that I constantly talked about this book by a guy called Daniel Pink. I can't remember the exact title, but
I think it's called When, isn't it?
Yeah, and the title is When, and it's a whole science of whether you're a night owl or whether you're an early bird and all this sort of stuff. And there's loads of it's a scientific book. It's not a Christian book, but it was brilliant. And that's a whole nother podcast. Maybe we could just do a podcast reviewing that book, because I thought it was just really fascinating. Just looking at kind of when we do things, and it's just really interesting. But let's not go down that road.
No, let's not. I mean, I would say as well, Tim, when it comes to like my diary, I don't use those 4 boxes, but I probably sort of keep it in my head a bit more. But I'm always thinking, what's really about calling and about how we set those big picture priorities. But I'm thinking, what really needs to go in the diary for next week? And I know it's kind of a cliche and people, but I really do genuinely say, right, where's my time with God? If that's the thing that's most important, I put that in my diary. I put in my diary time with my wife. I'll put in the diary, right, I'm going to have dinner with I'm going to aim to have dinner with my kids. For me, I aim to be present five days a week if I can. Now that will differ for everybody. It's different. I'm often out at breakfast. So, but I know what's going to help me flourish in the long run. I know what God's called me to, and therefore I must. So if someone says, "Hey, you're free Tuesday night for this super important meeting," and if that's the only night I've got a time with my wife, now I'll be flexible. There is times I'm not completely rigid, but in general, I'll say, "I'm sorry, I've got an appointment then." Or I'm sorry, I'm busy then. Can you do another time? And because I know what's important, it may not seem urgent that time with my wife, but it's important, and I've booked it in the diary. So that's how I kind of filter some of those things practically.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, hopefully this has been helpful to you. Just kind of talking through how we do a bit of task management. I'd like to say that this is not the only way of doing it. There's lots of other ways of doing it. And I think you've got to find a way that works for you, and hopefully that's answered your question, Sam, in a bit more detail. We do love the fact you're sending us in questions. If you do have a leadership question you'd like us to look at and explore, we'd really love for you to send them in. You can email us. And we'll put the email link in, or you can contact us on social media. But yeah, we love hearing your questions. We thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying it. Give us some feedback if you are enjoying it. We love the feedback. We love to know if we can do it better, if we're too long or we're too short, or all that kind of stuff. If I need to talk less and John needs to talk more because he's got more useful things to say.
I don't think so.
It's good. But yeah, so thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks. See you. Bye.